the future of work and learning. Wow. It really feels like the ground is shifting beneath our feet, doesn't it?
It really does.
Everything seems to be getting reshaped, and at a pace that honestly can feel pretty dizzying. And a lot of that, maybe most of it, is driven by these incredible leaps in artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
And while that's definitely exciting for some people, for others, it brings a whole heap of uncertainty.
A lot of questions.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a stack of sources. We're talking, research papers, really detailed reports from big international players like the World Economic Forum, the OECD, UNESCO.
Yeah, some heavy hitters in there.
Exactly. Plus, more focused analyses looking at what AI can actually do and insights into specific ways education is trying to adapt. Some real-world examples, too.
Right.
Our mission today really is to cut through all the noise, get into the weeds of this material, and pull out the most important bits, maybe the surprising things, or just the stuff you really need to know. The goal is to help you, our listener, get a clearer picture of this changing landscape, what skills are needed, the huge role AI is playing, and, crucially, what all this means for how we learn and how education itself needs to change to help you navigate this new terrain.
That's exactly right. I mean, the speed and the sheer scale of AI becoming part of everyday life. It's not some abstract thing anymore, not just lab talk.
No.
It's actively reshaping what tasks get done, how jobs actually function day to day, and maybe more profoundly, it's changing our whole understanding of what it means to be capable, to be informed, to be genuinely ready for what's coming.
Yeah.
We're really watching a fundamental shift in the kinds of skills and abilities needed to participate fully, both in work and just in society generally.
Okay, let's really try and unpack that transformation then, because the sources we looked at make it crystal clear. AI and automation aren't just like niched tech anymore.
Not at all.
They're everywhere. They're actively changing the workplace at what one source, this book, Robot Proof, calls full force. It's a strong phrase.
It is.
They even make this historical comparison that kind of stops you in your tracks. They suggest this shift is as big, as fundamentally disruptive to the economy as James Watt's improved steam engine was back then, to a world running on horses and human muscle.
Wow, that really puts it in perspective.
Yeah, think about that level of change.
And it's that scale and speed that are just, fascinating, but also pretty challenging, let's be honest. The World Economic Forum report, and this one draws on surveys from companies covering over 11 million workers across 45 countries, so it's brought some hard numbers.
Okay.
They estimate that by 2030, the combined effect of big trends, with technology adoption and AI right at the top, will lead to job churn. That's the key word, equivalent to about 22% of today's jobs.
22% churn. So that doesn't just mean job losses.
Exactly. It's crucial to understand.
No.
It's not a simple 22% cut. It's this massive redistribution. Their projection shows something like 170 million new jobs being created globally. But at the same time, around 92 million existing jobs are likely to be displaced or eliminated.
Okay, so huge creation and huge displacement happening together.
Precisely. The net result they project is actually growth about 78 million jobs added overall. But that net number really hides the incredible upheaval and the transitions needed for those, 262 million jobs combined that are either brand new or significantly changed or just gone.
That's a massive churn. And it's not just about factory floors anymore, right? Though automation's definitely speeding up there.
Right, it's moved way beyond that.
The Robot Proof source talks about things like driverless cars becoming more common in cities, or these really advanced robots that can handle complex physical environments, opening doors, climbing stairs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, navigating the real world.
And it really highlights this key principle driving it all. Any task that's predictable enough, that follows set rules, it's increasingly likely to be automated by smart machines.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And the McKinsey report breaks this down even further. They looked at how much time people actually spend on different kinds of work activities.
Okay, what did they find?
They found the biggest growth in demand for work hours will be in technological skills. Stuff requiring you to interact with and understand advanced tech.
Makes sense.
But on the flip side, they project declining demand in terms of hours worked for physical and manual tasks. And significantly, also for basic cognitive tasks.
Basic cognitive, like what?
Things like simple data entry, processing routine information, just following standard procedures, pretty predictable stuff.
Right.
And this just continues a trend we've already been seeing accelerate for decades. One that's really hit those middle-wage jobs hard, jobs that often involved exactly those kinds of routine tasks.
So it's looking less like a simple, humans versus robots fight.
Much more nuanced.
The WEF report paints this more complex picture, suggesting tasks will increasingly fall into, three main buckets. Performed mainly by humans, performed mainly by technology, or, and this seems key, performed by a combination of both working together.
That hybrid model. And this shift towards more hybrid work, humans and machines, raises a really important question. How's that balance expected to change?
Yeah, what do the employers think?
Well, the employers surveyed for that WEF report, they expect a pretty noticeable drop by 2030 in the share of tasks done just by humans alone.
Okay.
Their projections actually show things moving towards a kind of equilibrium, where tasks are split almost evenly across those three categories.
Yeah.
Mainly human, mainly tech, and that human-tech collaboration.
So almost a three-way split.
Yeah, roughly. And that's not just a minor tweak. It points to a fundamental restructuring of how work actually gets done across a lot of industries.
So for many jobs, the story isn't you're being replaced. It's more like you need to learn to work with the AI, to be augmented by it.
For a lot of roles, yes, absolutely. This idea of augmentation where AI tools boost human abilities rather than just replacing them, that theme comes up again and again in these sources.
Okay.
The McKinsey report, for instance, found something really interesting. Companies that were early and heavy adopters of automation and AI, they often actually expect to increase their total number of employees, not cut them.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
It does at first glance, but it makes sense when you think about it. Adopting AI lets them innovate faster, run more efficiently, maybe pursue completely new business opportunities. And all of that requires more human talent, just maybe different kinds of talent.
Ah, okay. Growth fueled by the tech.
Exactly. And we see this playing out in the practical uses of generative AI. The stuff highlighted in that top 100 Gen AI use case report.
Like what kind of uses?
Think about using Gen AI to quickly summarize or explain really complex technical documents, or generating first drafts for reports, marketing copy, even creative writing, or creating personalized learning plans tailored exactly to what an individual needs.
Yeah, those are powerful tools.
Right. These aren't really taking jobs away in those cases.
Yeah.
They're acting like incredibly powerful co-pilots. They dramatically boost human productivity, free up our time from tedious tasks, and can even enable new levels of creativity.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating for me. If the way we work is shifting so much towards this human-AI partnership model, what specific human skills suddenly become way more valuable? What are the things that AI doesn't do well, the things that really set human contribution apart?
Well, as those routine, predictable tasks get increasingly automated, it's almost natural that the demand surges for skills that are just fundamentally hard for current AI to replicate.
Okay.
And the WF report gives us a pretty clear list based on what employers themselves say they'll prioritize over the next 5 years. Right at the very top of the list, the skill expected to grow most in importance. Analytical thinking.
Analytical thinking. Okay, that makes total sense. AI can crunch unbelievable amounts of data, spot correlations, find patterns.
Right. But it can't really understand meaning in the human sense.
Exactly. Humans are needed to interpret what those patterns actually mean, understand the context, judge whether the data or the AI's output is even valid, connect dots between different pieces of information, and use real judgment to make complex decisions. It's about critically evaluating the AI's insights, not just accepting them.
Spot on.
So what other high-level thinking skills are crucial?
Creative thinking is also ranked extremely high. And right alongside it, systems thinking.
Systems thinking, thinking about the whole picture.
Exactly. Seeing how different parts of a complex system interact and influence each other.
Yeah.
And that robot-proof source we mentioned, it directly links this growing need for critical thinking and systems thinking to the inherent limitations of even very advanced AI.
Oh, so?
Well, AI, fundamentally, is brilliant at processing existing data to find patterns or make predictions based on those patterns it learned during training.
Right, pattern matching.
But it really struggles with things that require genuine novelty or abstract reasoning that goes beyond its training data or making nuanced judgments based on complex evolving context or adapting to situations that are completely new that it hasn't seen before.
And this connects to what the OECD Learning Compass framework talks about, right? They identify these transformative competencies.
Yeah. That's a great connection.
Things like creating new value, which sounds like innovation, problem solving, taking responsibility, that sounds like ethics, self-management, and reconciling tensions and dilemmas, handling complexity, ambiguity, conflicting viewpoints.
Precisely.
And the OECD flat out says these are uniquely human abilities that AI, at least as of this writing, simply can't compete with.
Exactly. These competencies really tap into the core of human intelligence that's much more than just sophisticated pattern matching. They involve our capacity for complex moral and ethical judgment,
Yeah.
demonstrating genuine empathy, understanding human needs in really nuanced situations, navigating ambiguity where there's no single right answer, dealing with conflicting demands, and making decisions that aren't just statistically optimal based on past data, but are aligned with our human values and consider long-term societal well-being. These are areas where current AI models just show significant weaknesses.
Right.
There's this fascinating source. Are language models just pattern machines? It's quite technical, but it shows something really revealing. Even on simple, like grade school level math problems.
Yeah.
These big, large language models can be surprisingly fragile. If you add extra information to the problem description stuff that seems relevant but is actually, inconsequential for the math itself.
Like distractors.
Exactly. Extra sentences or details that a human would instantly ignore as irrelevant noise for the calculation. When you add that noise, the LM's performance can drop significantly.
Wow. So it gets confused by stuff that wouldn't faze a person.
It suggests they're often relying heavily on complex statistical pattern matching, learned from seeing billions of examples in their training data. They associate certain input patterns with certain output patterns, but they don't necessarily possess a deep, robust, logical understanding of the problem or the underlying principles.
That example really drives it home. It shows why we can't just outsource complex thinking to AI. It might spit out an answer that looks plausible because it matches patterns it's seen.
Right.
But it lacks that underlying reasoning, that critical judgment needed to handle subtle changes or genuinely new problems. So our human capacity for judgment, for ethics, for dealing with complexity, that becomes paramount, especially when we're working with these powerful tools.
Absolutely paramount. And, it's not just about these higher order cognitive skills, as crucial as they are.
Okay.
The sources also really hammer home the indispensable and growing importance of what we often lump together as human skills or social and emotional intelligence.
The soft skills which aren't so soft anymore.
Exactly. Demand for social and emotional skills is projected to grow significantly. That's according to the McKinsey analysis again.
Okay.
And the WEF survey gives us a pretty detailed list of these non-cognitive skills that employers see as becoming more and more critical.
What's on that list?
Well, things like resilience, flexibility, and agility. The ability to bounce back, adapt quickly when things change unexpectedly.
Essential these days.
Totally. Then there's leadership and social influence, inspiring others, guiding teams, motivation and self-awareness, understanding what drives you and how you come across to others. Empathy and active listening, really getting where other people are coming from, understanding their feelings. Curiosity and lifelong learning, that proactive desire to keep learning and growing.
There it is again, lifelong learning.
It's everywhere. Also, talent management, the skills needed to actually develop and manage people effectively. And finally, service orientation and customer service understanding and meeting the needs of others, whether internal or external customers.
That emphasis on curiosity and lifelong learning really feels like the thread tying everything together, doesn't it? I mean, how can you possibly cope in a world changing this fast if you don't have that deep-seated drive and the ability to just keep learning?
It's absolutely fundamental. The OECD Learning Compass framework really stresses this. It says students need to develop the capacity to, and I'm quoting loosely here, learn to navigate by themselves through unfamiliar contexts.
Like learning how to learn, how to find your way.
Exactly. It's not just about having the map. It's knowing how to use your compass when you inevitably go off the map. And the robot-proof source also flags the critical role of having a growth mindset.
Right, the belief that you can develop abilities.
Yeah, the belief that your abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through dedication, effort, learning from failure. That mindset is just essential if you're going to embrace the challenges, persist when things get tough, and commit to the continuous learning and adapting that the future workplace is clearly going to demand from all of us.
Okay, so we have these higher cognitive skills, the crucial social emotional skills, but you can't ignore the tech side either, right? We're not going back to pen and paper exclusively.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Technological literacy is absolutely a foundational skill area now, and it's growing. If you look specifically at the fastest growing skills that the WEF survey identified,
Yeah.
AI and big data is right at the top of that list.
Number one fastest growing. Okay.
And skills related to networks and cybersecurity are also projected to grow very rapidly. So this shows clearly that while those uniquely human skills are becoming major differentiators, the ability to understand, interact with, and responsibly use advanced technology, especially AI and data, is still absolutely fundamental for getting by in the future.
And that robot-proof source, again, it introduces this idea of data literacy as almost a new essential literacy, puts it right up there with reading and writing.
Yeah, that's a powerful framing.
They define it as the capacity to understand and effectively use big data. So not just, running the numbers, but analyzing it, interpreting its context, recognizing its limitations, making sense of these complex information flows that come from data.
That definition really captures the necessary blend of skills perfectly. It's not enough just to know how to run a program that processes data.
Right.
You need the critical thinking to question where that data came from, what biases might be baked into it. You need the analytical skills to interpret the results in context. And you need the systems thinking to understand how this piece of data relates to broader processes or societal impacts. Data literacy isn't just technical, it's deeply intertwined with critical human judgment.
Okay. So if the skills demand is shifting so dramatically towards these higher order thinking skills, social skills, emotional intelligence, data, and AI literacy, skills that are, harder for current AI to just replicate than logically, education systems themselves, they have to change pretty radically too, right, to stay relevant?
Oh, absolutely. The sources argue this point incredibly strongly. It's not optional.
Right.
The OECD Learning Compass framework, for instance, makes a powerful case for moving away decisively from the traditional education model. The static, linear, one-size-fits-all curricula designed for a more predictable industrial past.
Yeah, factory model of education.
Exactly. Instead, it calls for learning approaches that are non-linear, dynamic, flexible, much more personalized. The whole goal shifts. It's not just about transmitting knowledge anymore. It's about preparing students with the capacity for interdependence, for adaptability, for active, responsible citizenship in a world that's complex and, frankly, unpredictable.
And the UNESCO framework seems to build on that, offering a kind of roadmap for this shift towards what they call a human-centered integration of AI-related learning.
Precisely. It provides concrete guidance.
That phrase human-centered feels really important. Like, it's not just teaching kids how to code AI or use the latest AI tools. It's about teaching them how to think critically about AI, about its impact on society, its ethical dimensions, and how we make sure AI actually serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly right. The UNESCO framework puts huge emphasis on this. Building core AI competencies in students has to be deeply connected with developing values associated with an ethical and human-centered mindset.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means students need to actively learn about and really internalize fundamental human rights, things like equality, non-discrimination, privacy, freedom of expression, and critically examine how these rights intersect with and are sometimes challenged by different kinds of human-AI interaction.
Okay.
It's about fostering critical thinking, about that dynamic relationship between human agency, our ability to choose and act, and machine agency. Where should humans stay in control? Where is machine assistance helpful or even necessary? These aren't easy questions.
No, definitely not. And the UNESCO source is pretty direct about this, isn't it? It says a specific goal for curriculum should be making sure students understand that AI is fundamentally human-led.
Yes, that's a key principle.
That it's a tool created by humans, guided by humans, and it can't and shouldn't replace essential human thinking or our intellectual development. That feels like a really powerful foundation to build an AI curriculum on.
It truly is. And to make this more concrete, the UNESCO framework lays out this progressive structure for building AI competence. They talk about different levels or competency blocks.
Okay, what are those?
They label them understand, apply, and create. Kind of intuitive.
Right. So can you break down what each of those looks like for a student learning about AI? What does understand really mean?
Okay, so at the understand level, the main goal is for students to get a solid grasp of the basics. what AI is, the key ethical considerations, and its broad impact on society.
Hmm.
So activities here might involve investigating and experimenting with some carefully chosen AI tools or systems. For example, a student might look into how AI is used in medical imaging to help doctors spot diseases.
Okay, like a real-world application.
Right. Or maybe explore natural language processing tools that automate tasks like summarizing long articles. The point is, for them to get a tangible sense of what AI is, and just as importantly, what it is not. Understanding its basic capabilities, the main types of AI they might encounter, it's about building that foundational literacy and starting that ethical awareness early.
Like seeing those examples you mentioned, AI and medical diagnosis, or maybe how it powers those automated customer service chats we all interact with. Those concrete examples from the UNESCO source really help illustrate what AI is and is not part.
Exactly. Those tangible examples make it real.
Oh.
Then, moving up to the apply level,
Okay.
the focus shifts.
Yeah.
Now it's about enabling students to actually use AI tools and methods in a practical context.
Hands-on stuff.
Yeah. This could involve activities like identifying a problem in their own life or maybe their local community where AI could potentially offer a useful solution, brainstorming applications, or maybe getting their hands dirty, experimenting with training a simple AI model using a small data set, perhaps classifying pictures of local birds or plants they've collected. It's about gaining practical experience with AI's capabilities and its limitations through actually trying to solve problems with it.
And then the create level, that sounds like the most advanced stage.
It is. The create level pushes students further. Now it's about developing the skills to actually design and potentially even construct AI systems themselves, even if they're just basic prototypes.
So actually building something.
Right. This requires demonstrating the necessary computational skills, maybe learning how to clean and prepare data for an AI model, using some programming tools, maybe leveraging basic cloud resources. But crucially, and UNESCO really emphasizes this at this create level, students are expected to apply their now deeper understanding of human-centered values and ethical principles throughout the entire design and build process.
So ethics isn't an add-on at the end.
Absolutely not. It's integrated right from the start. How you configure the system, how you build it, how you optimize it, ethical considerations should be part of every step. It's not just, can we build this, but how do we build this responsibly?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But it also sounds like teaching AI effectively can't just be confined to a single computer science class. It feels like it needs to be woven through everything.
You're absolutely right. The sources strongly argue for an interdisciplinary approach. The UNESCO framework explicitly suggests embedding AI learning not only within traditional subjects like computer science or ICT, but also integrating it across multiple semesters, maybe even into different subject areas entirely. And critically, it stresses that the human-centered mindset and the ethical principles for AI, they should be anchored and developed within students' broader social and emotional learning.
So ethics connects back to empathy, social awareness.
Exactly. Ethics isn't just a technical checklist you tick off. It's rooted in understanding human rights, developing empathy, being aware of social contexts. You could, for example, explore the ethical implications of AI bias in a social studies class, or analyze how AI is portrayed in science fiction in a literature class.
That UAE curriculum example you mentioned earlier, the computing, creative design, and innovation one, that sounds like it really embodies this interdisciplinary approach.
It's a great case study, yes. It explicitly integrates computer science with engineering, design principles, thinking about sustainability, visual communication.
Wow, quite a mix.
And within that integrated structure, they specifically focus on AI, but also on fostering creativity, developing real-world problem-solving skills, and embedding ethical considerations throughout. It's designed to be holistic.
And that kind of broad perspective seems vital, right? Not just for technical skills, but for helping students grasp AI's wider impacts, like its environmental costs, which you mentioned, or its complex societal effects.
Absolutely. UNESCO highlights this need. It's essential for nurturing the critical thinking students need to grapple with really tough issues like data privacy, algorithmic bias, safety, equity, inclusion, social justice.
Yeah, the big stuff.
These points are raised by both UNESCO and that other source focusing on the UAE, navigating the legal landscape. That source also brings up the crucial, sometimes overlooked, role teachers play in all this.
How so?
Well, teachers are on the front lines. They have a responsibility to ensure AI is used ethically and equitably in their classrooms, that they're following relevant laws and policies, maybe even advocating for better policies when needed. It adds another layer to the teacher's role.
Okay, so if that's what students need to learn, this blend of technical, critical, ethical, and human skills, how should this new kind of learning actually happen? What about teaching methods, the pedagogy?
Right, the how. The UNESCO framework suggests using a variety of teaching methods tailored to the students and the context.
Like what?
Well, they mention things like using clear, example-based definitions to introduce concepts, also using unplugged learning settings.
Unplugged, like no computers.
Exactly. Teaching core AI concepts using worksheets, physical sorting activities, paper-based case studies. This is especially useful in places where tech access might be limited, but it's actually a good pedagogical approach anywhere to grasp concepts before coding.
Interesting.
They also mention simulations, setting up scenarios that model real-world AI situations, and practical data pre-processing labs, where students learn the crucial steps involved in cleaning and preparing data before it even goes into an AI model.
That simulation idea sounds really powerful, especially for learning the ethics side alongside the tech. The UNESCO source had that example, right? Having students simulate a review meeting for a project proposing AI.
Yes, that's a great one.
And the simulation forces them to debate, is AI even the right tool here? What are the ethical pitfalls? What's the environmental impact? Are there non-AI alternatives we should consider first?
Exactly. It takes ethics from being abstract rules on a page and puts it into a practical decision-making context. It forces that critical thinking.
Yeah.
Not just can we, but should we?
Yeah.
Another method that gets strong backing, particularly from the robot-proof source, is experiential learning.
Learning by doing.
Essentially, yes. They see this as absolutely vital for developing the ability to actually apply knowledge and skills in real-world situations, which are often messy, unpredictable, and unfamiliar.
Right, not like a clean textbook problem.
Exactly. They talk about achieving FAR transfer, being able to apply what you learned in one context to a completely different novel situation. That's much harder, but ultimately much more valuable than just near transfer, where you apply it to something very similar to how you learned it.
So building a simple AI model in class is near transfer, but using AI skills to analyze real community data for a local project, that's FAR transfer.
Precisely. That deepens the learning immeasurably.
And the sources also suggest we need to move away from the teacher always being the sage on the stage, right? More towards facilitating learning.
Yes, there's a definite push away from purely teacher-centric models.
Yeah.
And that Myanmar teacher training source we talked about gives a really vivid picture of why this shift can be challenging.
Right. The student teachers struggled.
They struggled to implement child-centered, more participatory methods because they themselves had mostly experienced very traditional teacher-led instruction. It's hard to teach in a way you were never taught.
Makes sense.
And the source also captured their real anxiety about keeping up with the pace of change, feeling confident enough to handle complex student questions about AI. This isn't unique to Myanmar. It's a huge global challenge for teacher professional development. We need to support teachers in experiencing and mastering these new methods themselves.
And what about the learning environments? Where should this happen?
The UNESCO framework suggests flexibility here too. Learning can happen in those unplugged settings with physical materials, obviously using digital devices and software, or by accessing specific online AI systems and resources, but usually under careful guidance.
And didn't the UNESCO source also mention different ways of grouping students, like cohort-based learning?
Yes, that's an interesting organizational approach they highlight.
Yeah.
Grouping students, maybe even from different grade levels or classes, based on a shared interest in a particular AI topic or project.
Why is that beneficial?
Well, it encourages collaboration, peer-to-peer support, and helps build what they call a community of practice. Students work together on challenging problems, they exchange different viewpoints, especially on those tricky societal and ethical issues raised by AI, all within a supportive peer group.
That sounds a bit like the OECD's idea of co-agency.
It aligns very strongly with that, yes. The idea that learning is often most powerful when it happens through interactive, mutually supportive relationships between students with teachers, even involving the wider community, helping learners work together to achieve shared goals.
Okay, so if the what we teach and the how we teach it are changing so dramatically, then assessment, how we measure learning, that has to change fundamentally too. How on earth do you assess these new AI competencies, especially when students have access to incredibly powerful AI tools right in their pocket?
This is probably one of the most urgent and maybe the trickiest challenges facing education right now.
I bet.
The AIAS Revisited source tackles this head on. It introduces an updated framework specifically for this purpose, the Artificial Intelligence Assessment Scale, or AIAS.
Okay, AIAS. What's its goal?
It really has two core aims stated up front. First, to help open up a transparent, honest dialogue between teachers and students about what constitutes appropriate and ethical use of generative AI in academic work.
Okay, setting clear expectations.
Exactly. And second, to provide educators with a concrete framework to help them redesign their assessment tasks for this new reality. The AIAS suggests different levels at which AI integration might be allowed or even encouraged within a specific assessment.
So these levels could be things like maybe using AI just for initial brainstorming or outlining ideas.
That could be one level, yes.
Or maybe allowing AI to help with editing and polishing the writing, or even perhaps letting AI complete certain parts of a task where the student's job is then to critically evaluate, refine, and build upon the AI's output. Are those the kinds of levels the AIS describes?
Those are precisely the kinds of distinctions it makes, yes. The AIS explicitly acknowledges that activities like co-writing with AI are becoming standard practice in many professional fields.
True.
And it suggests that when it's structured properly, scaffolded, as they say, using AI in these ways, can actually support the learning process, not just bypass it.
So how does assessment need to change then?
The framework really emphasizes that assessments need to be redesigned to evaluate what remains uniquely human in the process. That means crafting tasks that specifically require students to demonstrate their ability to critically evaluate information, maybe AI-generated information, to develop and refine ideas, even if AI helped spark them, to exercise judgment, to bring in their unique insights, and to demonstrate ethical considerations.
So focusing more on the student's process and critical thinking, rather than just the final output, which might be partly AI-generated.
Exactly. The focus shifts. And at its highest level, which they call AI exploration, the framework even imagines assessment tasks, where students use AI tools not just to answer a predefined question, but to actually reimagine the kinds of academic questions or problems that are now possible to tackle because of AI.
Wow, that's a different way of thinking about assignments. But it sounds like assessments need incredibly careful design, and the rules about AI use need to be super clear for everyone. It's absolutely critical. Transparency and open communication between educators and students about how AI can be used, how it can't be used, and crucially, why the lines are drawn where they are, that's central to the whole AIAS approach. And the framework also, maybe subtly, points towards the known problems and unreliability of relying solely on automated AI detection software. It suggests that focusing energy on redesigning tasks and fostering transparent processes is likely a more fruitful path for upholding academic integrity than just trying to catch students out.
Right. Focus on assessment design, not just detection. Makes sense. But beyond assessment, the sources point to other big hurdles in making this educational transformation happen, especially around teachers. We touched on the Myanmar example, but the UNESCO framework also really stresses teacher professionalization. Yes, UNESCO is very direct on this. It states pretty unequivocally that providing high-quality teacher training and ongoing support, along with developing and sharing appropriate teaching resources focused on AI. These are the most important preconditions for actually implementing AI curricula and learning activities effectively for students at any level.
So teacher support is foundational.
Absolutely. Teachers need continuous opportunities to keep updating both their subject knowledge about AI, which is changing incredibly fast, as we know, and their pedagogical skills. Learning how to effectively design and lead these new kinds of AI learning experiences that are human-centered, ethically grounded, and suitable for different learners.
And that just sounds like a monumental ask for education systems and for individual teachers who might already feel stretched thin by existing demands, lack of resources, or just the struggle to keep up with tech changes like those student teachers in Myanmar felt.
It is a huge global challenge. It requires serious investment and systemic changes to support educators properly. And remember that navigating the legal landscape source.
Yeah, the one focused on the UAE.
It reminds us there's yet another layer of responsibility falling on teachers. They also have critical legal and ethical duties related to data protection, ensuring student privacy, understanding intellectual property rights when using AI tools in class.
Wow, okay, so teachers need training on the legal and privacy aspects too.
Yes, it highlights a specific urgent need for knowledge and training in that area for all educators. It's not just about the cool tech. It's about the responsible handling of student data and respecting privacy in the classroom.
And the sources also weave in those broader concerns too, right? Ethical, even environmental.
They do. The AIAS source, for example, briefly mentions the significant planetary costs, the energy, the resources involved in training and running these massive AI models.
Right, the environmental footprint.
Yeah, exactly. These aren't just technical issues or things for educators alone to solve. They are systemic, societal, even global challenges that education needs to acknowledge and probably incorporate into the curriculum somehow. How do we use this powerful tech responsibly in all senses of the word?
Okay, so pulling all these different threads together, it really feels like being future ready, being prepared for work and just life in this AI-infused world. It's not something you achieve by just getting a degree or learning one set of skills once.
Not at all.
It seems fundamentally about embedding this mindset of continuous adaptive learning throughout your entire life.
That concept of lifelong learning isn't just a footnote. It's absolutely central in nearly all these sources we looked at.
Yeah.
It's a core pillar of the OECD's learning compass for navigating life. It's explicitly listed by the WEEF as a key skill. Employers value more and more. And that robot-proof source sees it as completely essential for individuals to stay relevant, but also essential for universities and colleges themselves to adapt and thrive in the age of AI.
And Robot Proof talks quite a bit about how universities, which traditionally focused on those initial degrees, need to really broaden their whole mission, right? To serve this growing population of lifelong learners. They suggest it fundamentally changes the relationship people have with their alma mater. It's not just a place you went once. It becomes a potential resource for ongoing reskilling, maybe shorter courses, modular learning, support throughout a much more dynamic career.
Right, a continuous partnership, potentially. And this ongoing adaptation, this lifelong learning, it's about having the mental flexibility to absorb new knowledge as it emerges. And in AI, it's emerging constantly.
Constantly.
And then critically, being able to apply your skills and knowledge effectively to solve problems in totally new, often unfamiliar situations using novel tools and technologies, just like the UNESCO framework describes. It requires engaging in what the OECD Learning Compass calls the Anticipation Action Reflection Cycle, the AAR cycle.
Anticipation, action, reflection. Okay.
It's this continuous loop. You anticipate future challenges or learning needs, you take action, maybe learn a skill, gain experience, and then you reflect deeply on that action and experience to understand it better, broaden your perspective, which then informs your next round of anticipation. It's a dynamic cycle of growth.
And right at the heart of successfully navigating that cycle, navigating this whole changing landscape, is the learner, the individual, you listening right now, engaging with this.
Yes, absolutely. The OECD framework puts enormous emphasis on cultivating student agency.
Agency, meaning?
Meaning individuals having the inner capacity, the skills, the mindset, the will to not just passively react to the world, but to actively, positively influence their own lives and contribute meaningfully to the world around them.
Taking ownership.
Exactly. Developing foundational skills and knowledge is vital for agency, obviously, but just as important is learning how to use that learning compass, metaphorically, knowing how to orient yourself, make informed choices, find your way when the path isn't clear, and take responsibility for your own ongoing learning journey.
Which brings us beautifully back to that core principle from UNESCO, doesn't it? That AI shouldn't replace human thinking or human agency.
Right.
Ideally, it should be designed and used as a powerful tool to support and maybe even amplify our human agency, our creativity, our ability to make informed decisions.
Precisely. You know, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of education in this AI era isn't just about producing technically proficient AI users or coders. It's much broader, much more human than that.
Okay.
So developing individuals who possess and can continually refine those uniquely human capacities that actually complement AI. The ability to think critically, deeply, analytically, to act responsibly, ethically, to create genuinely new value through imagination and innovation, to navigate immense complexity and ambiguity with sound judgment, and crucially to embrace learning and adaptation as a lifelong endeavor. These are the core human capacities that current AI simply cannot replicate. And cultivating these capacities, weaving those human-centered values and ethical principles through every aspect of learning that seems to be the essential mission for education moving forward.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, pulling from this rich stack of sources. We've looked at how AI and automation are fundamentally changing the job market, driving this big shift towards skills that are distinctly human: analytical thinking, creativity, complex problem solving, social intelligence, adaptability.
Key takeaways, definitely.
We've seen the urgent need for education itself to transform, focusing on building these human-centered AI competencies, making ethics and critical thinking about AI central, not peripheral, and rethinking how we teach and how we assess learning. And we've really highlighted the absolute necessity of embracing lifelong learning and cultivating your own agency, your own ability to navigate, as key strategies for thriving. Understanding these shifts, well, it feels crucial for your own learning journey, your career path, your ability to just navigate the future effectively. We really hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and practical takeaways from these important sources.
Indeed. And perhaps, if the rise of AI really does serve as this powerful catalyst, kind of forcing us to define what truly makes us human, what capacities are most essential for flourishing in the 21st century, not just for getting a job, but for living ethically, creatively, purposefully in this complex, interconnected world.
Yeah.
Then maybe the provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away and mull over is this. Given everything we've explored today, how does your own personal approach to learning need to evolve, starting right now, to actively, intentionally cultivate those very human capacities within yourself?